This silly arrangement wrapping around the edge of the bench is all the small parts that are getting epoxy coated. And the book suggested, and I decided it was a good idea, to build all these little supports for these small pieces. And here's one. This one was problematic. The nails driven into the bottom of this piece kept falling out. So this one right now is standing upright. But it's just a piece of plywood, a couple nails into the bottom, and glued to the plywood here. And that just helps hold this piece so that I can epoxy coat it without touching it. And in this case, in all the other cases, it allows me to hang them upside down, which the book suggested so that the epoxy doesn't pool at the sharp bottom corners of these things. So here we have 8 foot braces for rowing. That's the aft seat. Got the alignment clips. And then up here we have 4, this is 2, but there's 4 of these rowing oarlock risers and a couple more cleats for the aft seat and the dagger board. So that's what this silliness is. It's going to get 3 coats of epoxy on everything, and it did really make it easy to coat these with epoxy. I don't know how else I would have done it. It would have driven me crazy. So this worked pretty well. It didn't really take that long to build all these things, but it does look kind of ridiculous. Over a couple days, I applied a couple coats of epoxy to all these small parts. I've just lightly sanded all of these, and I'm going to varnish all of this stuff. And these are nice looking little pieces, and they might as well be a little accent. I don't know how else to finish them anyway. So I'm going to varnish all of these before installation. And then much of this will get installed on the boat before paint so that I can do epoxy work. Because everything here, except the seat, gets installed with epoxy. So I'll do that before I prime and paint the boat. I was going to use this Petit Captain's varnish in a can, but the mechanism is not working. So I switched to this little pre-val sprayer. I love these things. I've never actually sprayed varnish with it before. I've applied some varnish with a sprayer onto all these small parts. I'll do quite a few coats. Make sure I have good coverage on everything. So anyway, that's the first of many coats that I'm going to put on these over the next today and tomorrow if I have to. This is the rowing cleat template that came with the kit, and it provides 4 locations on each side of the boat for the foot supports for rowing. It provides 2 different locations and 2 different seat positions depending on where the rower is and how the boat is loaded. So there's 4 cleats per side. This is the port side. The template fits right on that lower hull panel. starts up against the bulkhead. And what I'm doing now is just laying out these slots so that I can mask over them. And when the cleats are done, I'll put this template back in quickly and place the actual cleat and trace around it so I can cut out and glue it in. You can see on the other side I've already taped. After the layout with that paper template, leaving those masked areas on the boat, I came back with the template and marked the corners of each slot, and then removed the template, and with each of these 8 cleats, which I numbered, I traced around each cleat, cut the masking tape, and then I glued these in place with epoxy. I don't have video of that process, but plenty of photos in the log. So these 8-foot support cleats are now installed. It allows for 2 different height rowers at 2 different rowing positions. The aftermost rowing position would use these aftermost cleats, and that would be the end of the seat tongue. And then for a load in the stern, the rower would tend to move forward, so these 2 forward cleats are there for that. In addition, I glued in the row lock risers. These are required because of the geometry of the boat and the gunnels and the height and all that. So these are pre-finished. I did those at the same time as the cleats. You saw that. And then these are glued in place with epoxy. Again, I masked off the gunnel first, cut around each piece, and epoxied them in place that way. This forward one is 2 inches aft of the bulkhead, and that one is 22 inches aft of the bulkhead on center. 2 on each side, again for the 2 different rowing positions. A forward rowing position and a more after rowing position. So that gives the rower options here. So that's where some of these small parts go that I was finishing before with the epoxy and the varnish. It's nice to see these getting in place. What I'll do now is I'll mask these off, so when I prime and paint the boat, these will be protected. I chose to do it this way because then I could work with the epoxy on the existing surface. Didn't have to paint over it and then remove the paint to bond these or anything like that. This made the most sense to me, so that's how I did it. These aft seat cleats are installed in epoxy. These are pre-finished with epoxy and varnish. I cleaned up the bonding faces and installed them so that they're 7/8 of an inch below the top of the seat here, and some distance from the forward edge. I don't know exactly what it is. It's the same on each side, and I determined that by having the plywood seat actually in place here. Sorry, I don't have a video of that part, but you'll see it when it's all done. So they're screwed in place to hold while the epoxy cures. Later I'll pull those screws. Just the usual way to install. I taped around them, taped off the varnish, installed with epoxy, cleaned up the epoxy, blah, blah, blah. I've done it 1,000 times. Those are the aft seat cleats. The next step on these row lock risers was to drill through, all the way through the gunnel. I used a 5/8 bit, and it aligned with the existing hole in these risers. So I drilled all the way through with a block of wood underneath so it wouldn't break out the bottom. And then what you see here, with that epoxy about to drip onto the hull that I'll clean up in 2 seconds. I've epoxied the insides of those holes. Do at least this one coat, probably another coat a little later when I have some more epoxy going. Sorry, that was blurry. This is the epoxy in there. It's just for protection once the actual plastic row locks get installed. They'll be epoxied in place when all is said and done.